What's up, everybody, and welcome back to the Mid-Level Media channel, your hub for everything physical media and entertainment. I am Ken, here today for a very casual discussion on the Lethal Weapon franchise, because I've watched all 4 of these movies like within the last week. And yeah, I'm going to give my thoughts on all of them. They were all first-time watches. As you know, this month on the Mid-Level Media channel, it is Buddy Cop month. So I decided to dive headfirst into the Lethal Weapon franchise first. This is a franchise that ran from 1987 to 1998. 4 installments. So yeah, I'm excited to get into it, guys, and talk about it, talk about my positives, my negatives, all that good stuff. But before I do that, I want to ask, if you are not yet a subscriber of the Mid-Level Media channel, what are you waiting for? Hit that subscribe button for more great content. I do all kinds of stuff on this channel, mostly centered around the world of physical media. I will be speaking about these movies today from a streaming perspective. I did not buy these on physical, but most of the time we talk about physical media here, so definitely hit that subscribe button if you like that kind of stuff. And also be sure to like this video and comment down below if you have any thoughts on the Lethal Weapon franchise. What are they? Is it one of your favorite action franchises of all time? Are these your favorite buddy cop films of all time? Let me know in that comment section below. And also be sure to turn on those bell notifications for all future videos. So let's dive right into it, guys. Like I said, we got 4 movies to cover here today. First off, one thing I want to say before I start is I really enjoyed all these movies, but what usually happens when I watch all of these movies, or like a whole franchise back to back to back, if I'm not making notes as I go, which I didn't, I made a couple notes here and there, but I do just like to talk about stuff from a general sense. But if I don't make notes as I go, all of these movies just kind of run into each other for me. I feel like I can definitely pick apart like certain aspects about each one of them, which we're definitely going to do. But you know, so I'm going to do my best to kind of differentiate between each one of these installments as I go. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to talk about the franchise as a whole and just my overall experience on it. And then I'm going to break down each movie, you know, probably about 3 or 4 minutes on each movie, and just talk about my experience and, you know, how much I liked each movie, and I'll give my score, whatever I scored it on Letterboxd. And then at the end, I'll rank them for you guys as well. So this is a franchise that is pretty unique because not very often do you get all installments of a franchise directed by the same guy. And Richard Donner directed all 4 of these movies over the 11-year span. So doesn't always happen a lot. I'm trying to think of, you have Scream up until recently. All of those were directed by Wes Craven. They're talking about making another Lethal Weapon movie. So if that happens, which Mel Gibson is set to direct, then it'll not be the case anymore. Richard Donner obviously passed away a few years ago, so rest in peace to him. But yeah, so that's pretty unique because you don't always, I'm struggling to think of another franchise that has done that, but if you can, let me know in the comment section below. But starring Mel Gibson, Danny Glover, both of those actors are in all of these movies together. So yeah, created by Shane Black. So he wrote the screenplay, I think, for the first one. He created the characters, he created the storyline of the first one, and then I think all the sequels he just has a character credit to. I think the second one might be story, Bob, but 3 and 4 just characters. So, but he was involved in the creation of this franchise with the first film. So if you don't know Shane Black, you know, he's directed films like The Nice Guys. He's directed Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, which is another movie that I'm hoping to watch this month for Buddy Cop month. Just tons of movies. The new Predator movie, which, you know, wasn't that well received, but he's a big director. Iron Man 3, he directed as well. So he's done a ton of stuff. You know, and this whole franchise centers around 2 cops, Martin Riggs and Roger Murtaugh, as they're just like solving cases and crimes. Like every movie has its own set of problems and crimes and obstacles to overcome. It's a situation where, you know, 2 people from 2 walks of life, 2 different philosophies on how to be a cop and stuff, just 2 different personalities have to come together to solve a case. It's the old buddy cop trope. Even though I haven't seen a ton of the films, I know it by now. You know, coming together to solve crimes, to have to coexist. They don't get along. But I'd say after the first one, they pretty much get along pretty well going forward, and actually have a pretty good, nice, sweet relationship in the franchise. So total worldwide gross for this, like, it's no wonder they kept pumping out sequels for these movies, because they did very well at the box office. Total worldwide gross from 1987 to 1998 is $955 million. So almost $1 billion this franchise grossed just on box office alone. That's not counting physical media distribution or anything like that. But yeah, that is a very impressive haul. And like I said, it's no wonder they kept making these movies. They kept cranking out that money for them. Definitely some very popular films. But let's get into me watching all these movies and just kind of breaking down my overall experience. So I did watch all 4 of these movies on HBO Max because they don't really have like solid physical media releases for this. There's no like special edition Blu-rays or anything. There's a couple of multi-pack releases that I just didn't really want to add to the collection. And I know that they're going to put these on 4K. I don't know when they're going to put them on 4K. Warner Brothers owns the rights, but I have to imagine these movies within the next couple of years are probably going to hit 4K, and I'll buy them all then when they come out in whatever box set they release. So I didn't want to spend the extra money to buy like these multi-pack sets. I'm not really big on the multi-pack sets, and I don't know if they combined them together or if they're 4 discs or not. So I just watched it on HBO Max. I already own HBO Max, so why not? But one thing I'll say, and this might have diminished my experience a little bit, they look like crap on HBO Max. I'm going to be honest. They're just regular high definition. They're not 4K or anything on streaming. They didn't look good at all, especially the first 2. They really looked awful on HBO Max. I watch a lot of stuff on HBO Max movies. A lot of stuff looks pretty good. But I don't know. Something about these they just did not look good at all. So I will say the streaming quality for these movies on HBO Max look like crap, to be honest. But let's get into my positives. And again, I'm speaking on the overall franchise, and then we're going to dive into each movie talking about those. So positives, these movies have a certain 80s, 90s charm to them that I do enjoy. I love this time period. So even though I can recognize that like this might not age the best, like some of these jokes don't completely land like they probably did back in the 80s or 90s, I can appreciate them because I just enjoy movies that were made during this time. So there are some cheesy things that happen in this movie, some jokes, and I'm like, yeah, that's a little cringy. That doesn't really work. Just some stuff that I don't think really ages all that well. But I can appreciate it because I just like that kind of stuff. So that 80s, 90s charm is there. And I like it. And I mean, this franchise has got to be credited as like, I know Beverly Hills Cop came out 3 years earlier, but I don't really consider Beverly Hills Cop a buddy cop movie like I do this, because Danny Glover and Mel Gibson are leads in these movies. They are co-leads. They are both equally as important as the other one in these movies. Whereas in Beverly Hills Cop, like Judge Reinhold is like the buddy cop to Eddie Murphy, and he's clearly not as big or important of a character as Eddie Murphy is. So I kind of see Beverly Hills Cop as like a solo act, and the Lethal Weapon movies are really in the true spirit of what a buddy cop movie is. So these movies really set that template going forward for like every buddy cop movie in the late 80s and 90s and stuff going forward. Gibson and Glover, like, regardless of what you want to say about, I don't know, their performances, like I said, there's some goofy stuff in these movies that I don't think ages the best, but they've got great chemistry together in these movies. They're fantastic together. I love watching them interact. Even when the scenes are like a little cringy between the two of them, I still think it works, and I still think they bring it home because they are Mel Gibson and Danny Glover, and they're just like that classic duo. I can totally see it. I understand why everybody loved these movies, why everybody loved them back in the 80s and 90s. They just work together. They just work so well together, and the chemistry between them is just extremely charming and engaging. Just the entire franchise, from the first one to the fourth one. I like the running consistency. They're all directed by Richard Donner. They all have the same actors in them. The new characters get introduced pretty much every film, and then they show up in the sequels. But like from just taking like Danny Glover's family, just bringing them into it, like the wife's the same, the daughter's the same, which there's like a running joke between her and Mel Gibson, like from pretty much she's like age 17 in the first one, she has the hots for Mel Gibson, and then in the last one, Danny Glover thinks that he's still fooling around with his daughter when he's not, but he just has that hunch because they're like kissing each other on the cheek and stuff like that. But Everybody's the same. All the actors are the same for the most part. His sons, maybe they're different. I'm not sure, but I did recognize the daughter was the same. The wife's the same. The police chief is the same. Like, so all of the actors are the same. And I appreciate that consistency because it does give you that through line that you can just really latch onto and engage with throughout the whole franchise. So I did like it for that. And you know, like I said, certain ones I enjoyed more than others, but overall this franchise is pretty solid. There's some good action. There's some good gunplay. There's great car chase sequences in every single one of these movies. I definitely noticed that. And yeah, just some good action, good fun. And I enjoyed all of these movies for these positives. But getting into the negatives, one thing I'll say, and I noticed this with every single one, with the exception of what I would say is my favorite, but I'm not going to spoil that just yet, but it's a very jarring experience throughout most of these movies because they are constantly shifting back and forth between these extremely dark tones and then these comedic tones. And they're just going back and forth all the time. It's like something that's really dark and disturbing one scene, and then the next scene they're like laughing and joking and stuff like that, and just goofy stuff's happening. And so I don't think that it just feels tonally imbalanced, and I don't think that it really works. But again, this happened a lot in the 80s and 90s with movies. Like, I know that even with like children's films, there would be like extremely dark material just out of nowhere in this goofy kids comedy movie. Like Beethoven can get extremely dark with that veterinarian that's like, you know, trying to kill Beethoven throughout the movie. So this kind of stuff just happened in the 80s and 90s. So I can kind of overlook it, but again, like especially with the second one, and we'll get into that in a second, like there's some really dark stuff that's inserted into that one. And then they'll go for like a real goofy scene the next, like with Danny Glover sitting on the toilet and Mel Gibson yanking him off and the bomb goes off and all that stuff. But it's just the constant, just going back and forth like that. I don't know. It didn't always work for me. So I'd say that's kind of like a negative for me. And the storylines overall, kind of generic. It is, I noticed with this genre in general, and I hope that some other movies like take it and do something different with it, but the buddy cop genre can get very tropey at times. It can get very generic. It can get very wash, rinse, repeat with just some of the, there's a villain and two cops that don't like each other come together to solve the crime. And then, you know, stuff happens, shootouts, people get held hostage, and like that stuff just happens in every single movie. And there's nothing really different that happens. So the storylines just feel very generic. And the villains overall, they're kind of weak in all of these movies, I think. Maybe Jet Li in the last one's pretty good. I did like the final fight sequence with him. But yeah, the villains are weak, and just the storylines, they don't always work for me. But yeah, overall, guys, I really like this series. So let's get into these one by one. So Lethal Weapon came out in 1987. I'm going to read the synopsis right here, just so I can kind of visualize these movies in my head as I talk about them. But two newly paired cops who are complete opposites must put aside their differences in order to catch a gang of drug smugglers. So this was the introduction to both Riggs and Murtaugh. Martin Riggs and Roger Murtaugh, and them having to team together to take down this threat. So the whole setup for this is Mel Gibson, Martin Riggs' wife, had died like 3 years previous, and he's kind of unhinged. He's kind of mentally unstable, and they put Murtaugh with him, Danny Glover, to make sure that he's not trying to go out on leave or he's not trying to retire because of his mental instability. So they put him with him to kind of keep him in check, and also to kind of evaluate whether or not he is actually psychotic or he's just faking it. So again, it's kind of a weird setup. Kind of a dark setup. Again, Mel Gibson, I think he was married for like 11 years or something. This movie starts off with a very dark setup. It's the girl like doing cocaine in the hotel room, and then she falls off the balcony and dies. Like, that's the beginning of the movie. It's very dark, the way it starts off. You got Tom Atkins in this movie, who was the girl's father, so it was cool to see him in this film. So yeah, this is kind of Mel Gibson and Danny Glover's like introduction to each other. They're coming together to solve this crime. They don't get along throughout most of the movie, and then by the end, you know, they see eye to eye and they come together, and they become good friends, which is what happens in most of these movies. And then they take out the bad guys, and there you go. This one I did like. I do like Mel Gibson's character, how and this plays into like pretty much the whole franchise, especially part 1 and 2, but just how like mentally unstable and unhinged he does. I think he does a good job of playing that performance and really bringing a certain level of pathos to this character that makes him feel distinct from every other character that Mel Gibson's played. I don't see Mel Gibson, and it's crazy because I've seen so many movies with Mel Gibson in it, but I don't see Mel Gibson when I watch this movie. I see Martin Riggs. I see the character of Martin Riggs. So that's actually pretty awesome that he's able to bring this character to life the way that he does. So I do like Martin Riggs. Danny Glover's awesome in these movies too. He's the family man. He's the everyday man. He's 50 years old in the first film. He is already getting too old for this shit. Like first 20 minutes in, he says that iconic line, which I did find pretty funny and humorous. And yeah, Lethal Weapon, the first one, I get, why it's the action classic it is. It's not my favorite of all these movies that I watch, but I definitely get it. You got to have a starting point. And again, not the strongest movie overall, I don't think, in the franchise, but it's pretty good. I would give the first one a 3.5 out of 5. So moving into Lethal Weapon 2, this one came out in 1989, so just 2 years later. This is where you get the introduction to Joe Pesci's character, whose name is Leo. I thought his character was extremely goofy and over the top, and knowing what Joe Pesci's capable of in films like Casino and Goodfellas, which I think Goodfellas was like a year after this one came out. It's just so weird seeing him in this kind of movie and performance. It's very odd seeing him in this as this character. So I didn't really enjoy Joe Pesci in any of these movies, to be honest. And like, he's always going for the joke, and I know it's meant to be funny. I know I'm supposed to be laughing, but I didn't find anything he really did in these movies to be all that funny or humorous. But yeah, you get Joe Pesci. You get the introduction, like I said, of some very dark material in this movie, because reading the synopsis of this one, this is about Riggs and Murtaugh. They're on the trail of a South African diplomats who are using their immunity to engage in criminal activities. So you have these South African diplomats set up in these houses in the city. You can't touch them because it's not technically U.S. soil, but it's that kind of situation. And they're engaging in drug activity and stuff like that, and Riggs and Murtaugh have to take them down. But then it's revealed, and again, I don't know if I'm going to spoil anything. I got some heat the other day for spoiling something on the Physical Media Report, but I'll just say right now I'm going to spoil Lethal Weapon 2 a little bit, so if you don't want to hear it, zoom forward about a minute. But you find out towards the end of this movie that the villains in this film actually were responsible for Mel Gibson's wife's death before the first one. So that kind of brings that back into play. And then at the same time, like, he's fallen for this other girl that works for the bad guys, and then they kill her. So as he finds out that they were responsible for killing his wife, his new girlfriend that he has, they kill as well. And it just gets very dark very quickly. He gets thrown in the water. He finds her dead body. And I'm just like, whoa, slow down on Lethal Weapon 2. Like, you are getting way too dark, way too quick. But again, Mel Gibson plays it really good with his performance. At this point, he's just like completely unhinged, and that leads into the whole final act, like action sequences and them taking down the bad guys and stuff. But this movie just got really dark, and again, it was trying to be funny at the same time, and again with the tonal shifts and stuff that I didn't think always worked. But I did enjoy this one. I give this one probably a 3 out of a 5. I don't think I enjoyed it as much as the first one, but I did enjoy it quite a bit. Let's move into Lethal Weapon 3. And I was looking at the Rotten Tomatoes. I was looking at Metacritic and all that stuff. And so this might be controversial. I don't know what the fan base of the Lethal Weapon movies think of Lethal Weapon 3. But this one was probably my favorites of all of them. I love the introduction of Rene Russo's character. I love her in this movie. I think she's badass. I love the scene where they're just like, Mel Gibson and Danny Glover's just like sitting back and watching her whoop all these dudes' ass. I thought she was super awesome in the movie. I really like Lethal Weapon 3. I think that this one, for me, had the strongest villain. That whole scene where he's like dumping cement on that guy in the little housing place, I thought was really sinister, and just the way that guy played it. He was an ex-cop himself, so I like that storyline and how he had a relationship with the chief, and then he kidnaps the chief at the end. So I really like Lethal Weapon 3 a lot. That was probably my favorite of the whole franchise, probably mostly because of Rene Russo. And then I think of all the women that Mel Gibson interacted with before in Lethal Weapon 1 and 2. I don't remember if he had a love interest in the first one, but the second one, I think that him and Rene Russo have had great chemistry together, and I totally bought their relationship. And I was glad to see Mel Gibson actually get, you know, somebody that he really cared about by the end. And she didn't die. She almost did, but she didn't die. So I was happy for that. And Joe Pesci, you know, he's on the poster here again. Again, another character that I couldn't care less about. I did not like Joe Pesci in these movies at all. But yeah, this one had for me the strongest villain. I love Rene Russo, her introduction into the franchise. So Lethal Weapon 3 for me, to be honest, guys. Again, I don't know how this movie's received, but I'll give it a 4 out of a 5. And again, this one was probably the most comedic of them, but it didn't have a lot of those dark themes that the other ones did. So it was able to balance that comedy with the action. I think better than any of the movies, to be honest. But so yeah, I would give it a 4 out of a 5 for Lethal Weapon 3. Really enjoyed that one. Moving into Lethal Weapon 4, guys. This one came out in 1998. And this one was probably the weakest one for me. This was definitely probably the weakest one for me. I didn't think this was that good at all. And another thing that brought this movie down for me is this movie is 2 hours and 10 minutes. So it's much longer than it needs to be. You know, I don't think that I like Mel Gibson and Danny Glover in it, but the introduction of Chris Rock, I didn't really enjoy. I didn't think he really fit in there with Danny Glover and Mel Gibson. I don't know. He just didn't really have good chemistry with anybody in this movie. Rene Russo, who was awesome in the third one, they basically sidelined in this film. They waste her because she's pregnant. Which, you know, she should have, I don't mind her being pregnant, but she could have had the baby and then, you know, maybe went back to kicking ass or something if they went that timeline forward a little bit. So they completely sidelined Rene Russo, who is my favorite part of the third one. Chris Rock, I don't think was that good. Jet Li was an okay villain. Wasn't a bad villain. I did like the whole scene with them at the end, but after that big fight at the end, it goes on for like 20 more minutes. Rene Russo gives birth. It's just more comedy stuff that I don't like with Joe Pesci, who I feel like is in this movie way more than he is the other ones too. Again, another character that I don't enjoy in these movies. So Lethal Weapon 4 for me is by far the weakest of this franchise. So I would probably have to give this one a 2.5 out of 5. I really didn't enjoy this one all that much at all. It has some good action in it. I'll say that. Another really good car chase sequence. But overall, I didn't enjoy this one. So there you go, guys. That is my thoughts on the Lethal Weapon franchise. I hope I didn't disappoint anybody too much. I'll go ahead and give my ranking here real quick before we sign off. But I would go Lethal Weapon 4 at number 4. Then I would go Lethal Weapon 2 at number 3. I would go the first Lethal Weapon at number 2. And then I would go Lethal Weapon 3 is my number 1. Again, don't know if that's a hot take or not. I don't feel like I know which one everybody says is the best. I feel like everybody says the second one is the best. But let me know in the comment section below, what's your ranking on the Lethal Weapon films? What is your favorite? What's your least favorite? What are your thoughts on this franchise? What are your thoughts on my thoughts on this franchise? Let me know all that in the comment section below. Also, be sure to subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Turn on those bell notifications for all of those future videos, and I'll see you next time.